All right, what's good, Logan? So solving quadratic equations, um, the homework I've looked at so far, probably about 20 of them, has looked really bad. I need you guys to pay attention to the video and ask me questions tomorrow or Mr. Pham questions. All right, check this out. Number 5, we got 2/3 x squared plus 14 is equal to 20. You're solving it. Since there's just an x squared, you just have to isolate the x squared. That means you got to get rid of the 14 by subtracting 14 from both sides of the equation. So we're going to take away 14 from both sides of the equation. The result is going to be 2/3 x squared. So we're going to write that 2/3 x squared is equal, and then 20 take away 14 is 6. All right. After you do that, you want to get rid of the 2/3. The way we're going to get rid of the 2/3 is we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 2/3 reciprocal. That means 3/2. So we're going to multiply the right side by 3/2 and the left side by 3/2. This is going to make the right side have just x squared, or if you wanted, you could say 1x squared, because 3 divided by 3 is 1, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and you get 1x squared is equal to, if you don't know how to multiply this, the reminder is you can divide 6 and 2, so you can divide the 6 and 2 and then multiply to the 3, or you can multiply by the 3 and then divide by the 2. It seems like most of you want to multiply first and then divide, in which case you would get 18 divided by 2, which would then give you 9. So we have x squared is equal to 9. Finally, you want to get the x by itself by taking the square root of both sides of the equation. So we're going to take the square root on the right side as well as the left side. And when you do this, we have to include the plus or minus because we get two possible answers. So we're taking the square root of the x squared side and we're taking the square root of the 9 side. This is going to give us x is equal to positive and negative square root of 9, which happens to be 3. We have two solutions. Our solutions are 3 and negative 3. So we're going to say x is equal to negative 3 and x is equal to 3. All right, take a look at question number 6, sorry. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides of the equation by 2. So I'm going to divide the left side by 2, and I'm going to divide the right side by 2. Once again, notice I am not multiplying the square. I'm not multiplying. I'm not foiling it out, and I'm not distributing. All I'm trying to do right now is isolate the x. Since there's just an x or an x squared in the problem, we can go ahead and try to isolate it. This is going to give us x minus 4 squared, because the 2's cancel out, equals some fraction. Now I can't divide 5 by 2, or I can, I just don't want to get a decimal, so I'm going to leave it as 5 divided by 2. Next, I'm going to take the square root of both sides of the problem to get rid of the square. So I take the square root on the left side, and I'm going to take the square root on the right side. Not forgetting the plus or minus, so I have the square root of x minus 4 squared is equal to positive negative square root of 5/2. What this does is it cancels out the square and the square root so that we have just x minus 4 is equal to positive and negative square root of 5 over 2. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, that is not allowed, you can't have a 2 in the denominator, that is correct, but I'm going to address it at the very end of the problem. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add both sides by 4 to get the x by itself, and this gives us two answers. X is equal to 4 plus square root of 5 over 2 and minus the square root of 5 over 2. Now, don't forget, we're going to rationalize, and we're only rationalizing the radical. We don't need to worry about the 4, so we're going to multiply the bottom by root 2, and we're going to multiply the top by the square root of 2. The result is going to be plus or minus the square root of 10 over the square root of 4. Now, we know that the square root of 4 is 2, and we get rid of the radical in the denominator. Our answer for number 6 is that we have 4 plus the square root of 10 over 2 and 4 minus the square root of 10 over 2. So I'm going to rewrite the problem in descending in order from smallest value. That would be the subtraction 1, 4 minus root 10 over 2, and followed by 4 plus the square root of 10 over 2. This is just me separating it so that we understand that there are two distinct answers. All right, moving on to question number 7, we have 3/4 times the quantity x plus 1 squared is equal to 10. So what we're going to do here is we're going to multiply both sides of the equation to get rid of the 3/4. So I'm going to multiply the left side by 3/4 reciprocal, which is 4/3, and I'm going to multiply the right side by 3/4 reciprocal, which is 4/3. On the right side, on the left side, it's going to cancel out to just 1, and we get x plus 1 squared is equal. And then since 3 can't divide 10, I'm not going to do the division first. I'm just going to multiply 10 and 4, which is 40, and I get 40 thirds. Now that's not something that can simplify, so I'm going to leave it like that. And now I'm going to try to get rid of the square by square rooting the left, which means I'm also going to be square rooting the right, not forgetting to put the plus or minus into the problem. So now we have the square root of the x plus 1 squared is equal to positive negative the square root of 40 over 3. Once again, 40 over 3 can be simplified if it has a radical on it, so I'll reduce that later. But I'm just going to write out, I'm going to solve for x first. We get x plus 1 is equal to plus positive negative the square root of 40 over 3. I'm going to add one, sorry, I'm going to take away, I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides of the problem, and our answer is going to be x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 40 over 3. Now, I'm going to simplify the radical that we have here, and there's two things that need to be simplified. Number one, we need to rationalize it. That means we're going to multiply the bottom by the square root of 3, and we're going to multiply the top by the square root of 3. This is going to give us negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 120 over the square root of 9. But since the square root of 9 is just 3, I'm going to write it as 3. Now 120 is 4 times 30. So I can simplify that thing right there. The square root of 120 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 30. So I can simplify this even a little bit more. I'm going to get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 4 over the, sorry, not over, times the square root of 30 over just the 3. Now, since the square root of 4 equals 2, I can write my answer as negative 1 plus or minus 2 square root of 30 over 3. Now, if you want to separate your answers into the positive and the negative version, we can write, sorry, the biggest to smallest to biggest, we can write negative 1 minus 2 square root of 30 over 3. That's one of our solutions. And then we have a second solution, x equals, I'll have a second solution at negative 1 plus 2 square root of 30 over 3. All right, if this does not make sense, you need to ask questions in class. All we're doing is solving for x by isolating the variable. This is going to get much more complicated, so you want to make sure you understand at least these first two techniques, solve by graphing and solve by using the square root. Square root, make sure that you have x squared and no x. If you have an x, you cannot use this technique. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Catch you guys on the flip.